Hello and welcome, more Binding of Isaac AfterBirth Plus. Let's do another Isaac run. Oh, I'm pressing the wrong buttons. Here we go, here's your seed. R2AL1GKX. That was a mistake, didn't want to go in there. Okay, great PhD, so that's an excuse to actually take pills. So admittedly I'm quite nervous about recording this episode, not because I'm nervous playing the Binding of Isaac. I've already put about 600 hours into it, or probably even more than that actually. I'm probably underestimating that by a couple of hundred hours across various different platforms. But because last night my computer, while I was watching some YouTube videos across both screens, I had a lot of green artifacting. Ooh, petrified poop. Yeah, a lot of green artifacting, and the browser was playing up and displaying weird. Then this morning my boot time was horrifically long. In fact, he didn't even boot at all, so I ended up doing a forced reset. It's about 4 years old, and I know some people will look down on this, but it's an Alienware. I think it's an Aurora R1, I think was the model name. So it served me well. I've had to do very little to it other than replace the traditional hard drive, because that gave up the ghost, and I upgraded the graphics card from I think a NVIDIA 660 I want to say to a 970, but other than that it's served me brilliantly, so I don't know if it's coming to the end of a 4-year lifespan or not. In saying that, I'm not sure that I would go for another Alienware. Their case design makes doing any upgrades extremely fiddly. Getting the hard drive out in particular was a complete pain in the backside. The system that they used to clip the hard drive in was extremely awkward. I think I ended up snapping one of the clips off because they had no guidance on the case as to which way the clip was supposed to go. So I thought it was just a little stiff. Oh, that was brilliant. Turns out it wasn't, but the fans that they put on this thing, I mean, I think if you jacked my voice volume up, or jacked the volume of this YouTube video up, you probably hear some whining in the background. And I run all my audio through Audacity to try and clean it up and make it sound as good as I can, but I think even when I've turned it up, then you can still hear this sort of, say whining, maybe the wrong word, but there's some definitely very loud white noise in the background of it. I'm booting it up now with the fans, because it's got this sort of inbuilt Alienware. I don't know if people probably call it bloatware, but it's got like this thermal controller thing which controls the speed of the fans, and you can set them to custom speeds and monitor temperatures in different ways, which I suppose admittedly is quite cool. But whilst it's booting up, for some reason it runs the fans at 100% and won't actually slow down until it's finished its boot sequence. So as the boot times have been getting longer and longer, then it's a good sort of 2-3 minutes whilst it's been booting up, the fan's going at full speed. It sounds like a bloody aircraft taking off now. And in comparison to that, we bought my son. My son got a new computer for Christmas. Oh, this was bad. 1 year. And he was lucky enough to get one with one of these sort of silent case fan things, and the comparison in terms of, you know, how quiet it is when it boots up and things in comparison to my computer is, it's unbelievable really. Like, you can, even when you're sort of stressing it out while running fairly demanding games, you can barely hear it at all. So yeah, the reason for the nervousness is that if it is giving up the ghost, I don't know if all that sort of green artifacting was, you know, just a glitch that happened, or if it's something that is really spelling the end of time for this machine, then stressing it out by, you know, because I record it and I record the audio separately, and this is probably not really any great surprise to people who don't make people who do make YouTube videos even. But then, you know, record the game, record a few seconds of blank audio, just to sort of try and eliminate the background noise of the fans and whatnot in the computer later on. Yeah, play the game with the commentary, so the game's recorded in XSplit audio through Audacity, as I've probably mentioned. Bung them into Adobe Premiere and try and sync them up as best as I can. Although I gather that Premiere doesn't really like MP4 files so much, so I have to run it for a bit and then check if it's all synced up correctly with the game audio, and the actual video tends to desync if it doesn't like it. For some reason it's been randomly okay lately, but on the first few videos that I did, it was massively out of sync, like 2 to 3 seconds by the end. So yeah, sync that all up and import the audio, match the audio, my vocal audio that is, to the game audio and what's happening, and then process that, then get a file size which is absolutely hideous, then run that file through Handbrake to both shrink down the file size, but also to get the frame rate at a constant frame rate. So that usually shrinks it down by 2/3. So for an average Isaac episode I found so far, the game file by itself will be about 900 meg. Then the Audacity audio is somewhere between 700 and 800 meg. Putting them all together and then rendering them through Premiere will turn up a file size of about 2.3 to 2.6 gig, which isn't bad, all things considered, but I've currently got an upload speed of 0.8 meg, so something like that I'm probably looking at a 5-hour upload, and then somewhat gambling that YouTube is not, you know, the internet's not going to cut out, the YouTube's going to process it in a pretty fast speed. So shrinking it down to, with Handbrake, will take that sort of 2.6 gig, put it down to roughly about 1, maybe 1.3, which is far more manageable. and yeah, far more manageable, and I've done it again. I thought I had a battery charge around here for the golden teleport. I'm not learning, I'm just not learning that at all. I don't think there was a battery. Where was I? Yeah, so it takes it down to about 1.3, which is, you know, pretty good, especially with that so poor of an upload time. You know, 0.8 meg is nothing to write home about. I mean, I'm not stuck doing YouTube videos, but I've got to say that, you know, any thoughts of streaming, live streaming either on Twitch or YouTube, is just completely out of the question. There's no way you could even get a decent stream going with a 0.8 upload speed. Just not happening whatsoever. Yeah, the only thing I could potentially consider is text-based adventure games. But anything with any kind of graphics is that's just going to be a complete no. But all in all, I'm hoping that the computer will hold out, at least for a bit longer. Like I say, I don't particularly want to go for an Alienware again, not because I don't like them. I think they're fine. I know you do pay for the name and whatnot, and you do get a lot of bloatware. And for when I bought it, you know, just having the convenience and knowing that it would work, it wouldn't need too much intervention, then blah-de-blah. It was good at the time, but I think now I would probably go with building one myself, or at least going with something that doesn't come with so much bloat attached to it. Maybe something like a Cyberpower, where you can just pick every component that you want. And I think this time definitely go for a more, I wouldn't say generic, but more you know, straightforward boxy case, which gives you a lot more options in terms of cable management, and sort of future-proofs it a little bit. I think, you know, the Alienware case I've got is nice. It's got some, it looks good. It's got some, you know, neat little ports on it. It's got the little Alienware alien logo bloke on it, which is fine. Lights up, changes colours. But in saying that, it's a complete pig to upgrade some of the materials, some of the elements of it. Some of the sides of the case are not exactly straight either, so they're slightly curved to give, you know, for a specific effect. So when I looked at upgrading my graphics card from the 660 and ended up getting a 970, ended up having to do some fairly careful measurements, because some of the longer graphics cards, I think the 1080s had only just been announced at that point, but there just didn't seem to be a way that I would be able to fit them into the case, because I think they were either slightly too long or slightly too fat. There was just no way that they were getting in there at all. I didn't even notice the little dude there. So I'm doing my best to chuck this one in a bin. Not my computer, but the run. Yeah, completely. I think I'm just hyper aware at the moment that if it is dying, I keep looking to the second monitor just to see if there's any sort of that artifacting creeping across, because it seems to creep across from my right hand monitor onto my left hand monitor last night. And the way I've got it up, my left hand monitor is the one that I actually play the games on, and then the right hand monitor is the one where I've got my Audacity running and XSplit, so I can see what's going on there. So I'm always looking to see if I may as well try the pill. Let's look up. I wasn't maybe not so concerned about Isaac, but I'm also playing Neo at the moment, which I'm enjoying a lot. But I know that it's going to be a more demanding game on the system, so if it is a case that it's running out of juice or it's had too much stress, I mean, I have stressed it out a lot more than normal because I've been trying to go for daily uploads, so you know, the rendering times in Premiere and then handbraking it does stress the system a lot. I mean, when you look at the system monitor levels, it does say that this CPU is maxed out on both applications when running both applications, not at the same time of course, but you see what kind of load it's putting on the system. But then again, maybe it's a case of if it goes, it goes. There's not much I can do about it. Or maybe it was just a one-time glitch, and whilst yes, it is showing its age and slowing down a little bit, it was just a one-off and shouldn't be too concerned about it. So how's the run going? We're still at 3.5 damage, which is the base for Isaac. I think the rate of fire is DPS has increased slightly in terms of the rate of fire, but in terms of everything else, it's not really a lot to write home about. I mean, some of it is of course bad play. I never should have lost all those spirit hearts. Maybe I should just ignore what's going on in my other monitor, and like I say, if it goes, it goes. So I started scoping out prices for new computers because, you know, it has been 4 years since maybe even longer than that. But I think it's been at least 4 years since I got this one for myself, and so just checking out the prices, and trying to decide if I need a 2 PC setup, so one PC to handle the game recording and capture, and one to actually play the games themselves. And then the other one as the workhorse in terms of, you know, capturing the games. Doing all the Premiere stuff on that one, and then handbrake, and then using that one to upload. I think it's got a lot of benefits. I can customize each machine for its own sort of specific purpose, but also in saying that I can have the certainty of having one spare. I don't know. I think definitely what I'll end up doing next time is having a machine with multiple hard drives, because at the moment I've only got one. I think it's a 3TB hard drive at the moment, but it's I believe mechanical. It's not a solid state. So I would definitely want a solid state drive, and maybe a couple of normal drives as data storage. Because I find that even just pumping out one video a day, you know, you want to try and create a little bit of a backlog just in case like your voice gives out, or maybe things are crazy at work that day and you can't always get the time to record or upload, or but it's been interesting. I didn't originally set out to make Let's Plays on the channel. I did enjoy making critiques, but I think I got too much in my head about it. I think I only probably ended up posting 4 or 5 of them, maybe. And I did enjoy making them. Oh, for God's sake. But like I say, I think I got too much in my own head, and the number of projects that I had scrapped. Critiques that will never see the light of day because, I don't know, I think I couldn't get out of my own head that some of them I had come into it with a predefined point that I thought I was going to make. So I did one on Half-Life 2, and I genuinely get my teeth in. Don't like that game at all. But then, as I found that, but it's also a game that I have played numerous times, because I think it's one of these situations where I don't fully understand why it's got the critical reception that it got, and that's even coming from the point that I played it when it was first released and then watched everybody gush over it, but I never understood it because I didn't have that reaction to it. I didn't see there's something about it that I wasn't perceiving. Maybe it just wasn't for me, although, you know, at the time shooters were probably my game of choice. It never ever struck a bell with me at all. So to try and cut through a long rambling story, I played it again because I thought, well, this is a perfect one to do a critique on, because I already know what I think of the game. I just have to play it through again with a 2017 at that time set of eyes. And what I found was I didn't enjoy the game any more or any less playing it again, probably for the 4th or 5th time at that point. But what I found was I had recorded the whole game and wrote down some general thoughts. Then I started writing my critique, which my process was to fire up each video, fire up Microsoft Word, and just start typing and write the critique as my gameplay was going, and then just keep, you know, going, typing as I was watching it, basically. So I think the idea of doing it that way was that I would have my thoughts from playing the game, generally, you know, pretty much note free. Was playing, so the only thing that I was worried about was that the software capture was still running and hadn't glitched out or stopped recording, or I hadn't done anything stupid like not set the scene correctly, which I started to do in my Darkest Dungeon videos quite a few times actually, and I could just get on with playing the game, and then once I'd finished, write down some general notes, and then start watching the videos back in the media player whilst typing it up in Word and doing it that way. So then when I got to a point that I wanted to focus on, I had the video there, I was going through the game in order. It seemed to work. What I found from doing the Half-Life 2 one though was my actual own feelings about the game. I still didn't like it particularly. I still don't understand why it got the critical reception, but in actually typing up a critique and trying to be fair and biased about it and finding examples, when I read back my writing, my writing was actually a lot more positive on the game than I'd ever intended to be. So the Half-Life 2 critique just failed on this. It just completely failed, because my point was all based around I don't like it, I don't understand it. Well, that's not true. I don't like it. I did understand the game. Not that there's not a lot not to understand about the game, but not understanding the critical reception. But when I actually came to the point of typing that up and using examples, the actual writing process actually turned my perception more positive. Than I had ever originally intended. So that Half-Life 2 one just felt like a complete fraud. So that one's never seen the light of day. Other ones that got scrapped, Gone Home. Although that was scrapped for different reasons. I ended up quite liking it. I was going to say quite enjoying it, but I don't know that Gone Home is a game you're actually supposed to enjoy. It's one of these supposed to be, I guess, full walking simulators that is attempting to tell a story of its time. So I got it, and you know, as I got it, I understood what the game was trying to do, the message it was trying to communicate. It was slightly ham-fisted in doing it, and I think relied on its nostalgia factor a bit too much. I mean, I guess people could argue that any which way they like, whether the nostalgia added to it. You know, whether it's cool seeing VHS tapes around and VHS players and all the throwbacks, like I think the collectible magazines, not collectible, but the magazines that you could find which would show teen heartthrobs, I think. I'm probably misremembering some of this, but there's lots of nostalgia. But the first half of my critique was how this whole game felt like it felt like it was a bit of a bait and switch, I guess is probably the simplest way to describe it. And by that, it starts with a very spooky almost a horror-y kind of vibe, I guess. You know, you turn up at this house, there's a thunderstorm going on, everything's all dark and it's turned off, no one's home, you don't really know what's going on. As you find out, it is explained quite nicely that this is more of a family dynamic that has gone completely wrong. Mum and dad aren't doing so well in their own relationship. Your sister is having issues at school and with mum and dad and their relationship and feeling misunderstood. But the game, I think up until that point where you get deeper into it, it feels like it's going for a horror vibe. So I'd written it with the idea of this feels like a bit like a bait and switch, but actually it just feels like, I think I'd even made the point that if you'd had made it so that she had turned up at midday and it was lovely bright sunshine, you took out the rain and the thunder and the gloomy atmosphere, it wouldn't have hurt the story in of itself, but maybe that was just a little bit of, not misdirection, but just a poorly thought out choice. And so I finished writing a critique on that basis, that I generally like the game. If we're going down to the argument of whether it is a game or not, because I think walking simulators have had that issue, but I generally liked it. But I felt that the horror elements they didn't add anything to it, so I felt it was a bit of an artistic misdirection, what do I actually want to say? A bit of misguided art direction, I think. It turns out that when I'd actually put the thing together, that actually was indeed the case. That a lot of the marketing, I think, had come out that yes, they were going for this to be a more, they had specifically advertised it as a horror experience where there is no horror to be found in that game whatsoever. Even when you find some of the more hidden areas of the house, and there's talk about pirates, and this was an old smuggling house, and so this is the reason why you could probably criticise the game for having the house be far too large and possibly unrealistic. That no, this was actually a house used by smugglers a long time ago, so that's why it's a bit like a little bit of a rabbit warren, and there's all these secret passages and smuggling, so it makes sense, and it also pads out the length of the game because I guess for the average person's house, you're not going to be, it doesn't take 45 minutes to walk from one end of it to the other. Even if you are looking in cupboards and stuff, however briefly. So yeah, that one never got released because I felt my point had kind of outdone itself. That there was nowhere for it to go. Yes, it was, in effect true that they had misdirected consumers somewhat in their purchases, because what looked like it should be a horror experience was nothing of the sort. This was a coming of age story that had nostalgia themes. Tale of broken relationships, family dynamics that don't work too well, but there's no actual horror there to be found. I'm guessing this episode is going to be Stu's YouTube confessional. these are all the projects that I wanted to do but didn't do. So while we're on that note, my next plan to morph the channel was to tackle games that had bosses that I could release constant content, which if you've seen some of the Darkest Dungeon videos, that was what I was going. So as I would come across a boss, I was recording every second of the experience anyway, but as I would come across a boss I would make a note of it and, you know, which file it will be saved under and the time, so that I could chop that up and release content to YouTube in a sort of steady drip feed fashion. The problem with that, like I say, is like if you forget to press record, or you do press record and you forget to actually set your scene on XSplit, so it's recording so it doesn't record the game window. So you forgot to change your setting over from one game to another, and so you just get a complete black window. The problem is that there's no do-over. So once I lost content on a couple of times, it's like, well, I'm going to record every boss in the Darkest Dungeon, except for these couple which I missed out because I was, I didn't set my recording up properly. So that would automatically just eliminate any value that series would have had. But also, the deeper I got into the Darkest Dungeon videos, I do love the game, but I realised I didn't have anything to actually say about it. Which is a horrifying thought when I can't remember how many videos I'd actually released in terms of the bosses, but I figured that there would be, before a main big critique, maybe an hour or so long, proper in-depth look at it. But there would be these boss fights, and they're fairly easy to do. They're only a couple of minutes each. So the content itself was simple, straightforward, fast upload, perfect. Problem is, as I got deeper into the game, and it's one of my favourite games of all time, I actually didn't have anything to criticise about it. The points that I thought I could make were irrelevant because I just didn't care about them. So one of the obvious criticisms of Darkest Dungeon is that it obscures. All the numbers are meaningless. I think obscures is not the right thing to say at all, but the actual numbers are meaningless. And I think once you make that distinction, or where you have that viewpoint, then the criticism is not worth the time of day. So one example of that, I guess, is you have a character class like the Crusader, who's got a stun ability. So you go up against a mob and say they have a 40% resistance to stun. More often than not, you're going to get through that, no problem. But sometimes you'll have these instances where you'll fail 5 stuns in a row. Just won't apply. So that can feel just like super bad luck. But hey, you know, what can you do? In other instances, you can, on your own team, you know, you can have a hero that has, you know, over 100% resistance to something, and the enemy has a weak chance to apply, say, poison. You got a high resistance to poison or bleed, and the enemy's got a you know, fairly low chance of applying that bleed or poison or whatever you want to say, but they consistently hit it through every time, which can feel super frustrating. And you could perhaps say, well, that's on the game devs for making the numbers fairly opaque and not transparent. But I've found that I didn't really care. The numbers were, you know, if you treated the number as a source of stress, then you would obviously get stressed out by it. The game would be super stressful to play. And you probably would end up not liking it. This run is just not going well. I don't know if it's because I'm distracted because of the computer or quite what it is. But also other things like the you know, if you're playing on the normal mode, which I forget what it's called because they changed the names of the mode around a couple of times, but on the base Darkest Dungeon experience, then you're probably looking at completing by week 100, 110 maybe. You can probably do it a bit faster if you don't do all of the objectives, but so you're probably talking about 60, 80, you know, maybe even 100 hours to get through one campaign of Darkest Dungeon. So one thing you might think you can criticise was, well, you know, the grind is overly long, because maybe you lose a few high-ranking heroes along the way, and you've got to, you know, take that time to. You've got to take that time to get them back up to speed, or get replacement heroes back up to speed, and so, you know, you lose a couple of high-ranking heroes. Maybe that's 3, 4, 5 weeks that you need to take them out on a few long runs to really get their hero resolve level back up. Again, I just didn't care because it was more Darkest Dungeon, and if you like the game, then more Darkest Dungeon is fine, and there's always stuff to do. So it quickly got to the point where I was thinking, well, I could make all these points. They would possibly be valid points, but I don't know what I can say about them because I just don't care. That seems like a bit of an empty critique, and I think perhaps what I should have done is just recorded it all and then started releasing the boss content after I was done, so that I knew would have had something to say. But hey, yeah, I think you live and learn in that one. Another project I was also keen on was actually, funnily enough, a Binding of Isaac one. And if you've been watching any of the videos, and I've shown it at the start, you can see that I've got 3 clear saved files. But I've actually got did have save files that were pretty substantially complete. So I was having a moment, I think, around the release of the first or second booster pack, where I was having several runs in a row which fairly similar to this one before we got Stephen, where there was just no damage. And it was getting fairly consistent, so my genius idea at the time was to completely delete my saves. I would set up an Excel spreadsheet and I would track each run with each seed of each character, each floor, each boss, each active and passive item picked up, because I was so desperate to prove this point that the further, the deeper that you get into the game, the less damage ups you get. But also the effect of the booster packs was that in effect they were a net damage reducer, not even themselves, but there's been some meme items released in the... I didn't want to do that. There's been some meme items released, and not many that are just pure straight damage ups, so the item pool was hugely diluted. Turns out again that I had got about 20,000 rows down on my Excel spreadsheet. I'd recorded hundreds of runs, and I'd started tracking win percentages and item drop rates and goblins like that. But the problem was, a bit like the Darkest Dungeon one, even though I wasn't recording these episodes, each one, that wasn't really the point. I started to have moments of doubt where, did I pick up that item? Did I record it? Or did I forget to jot it down? Which boss did I just beat? And whilst no one would have ever known, I think you and yourself know that, maybe that content would definitely have been compromised. And if anybody had ever bothered asking about it, then I couldn't hand on hearts, say that it was a completely robust process and that it was completely accurate. So I scrapped that one. I mean, again, in effect what I could have done was just recorded every episode until I got a full complete save file, watched it all back and recorded it that way. I don't know how many hundreds of hours that would have taken though. That would have been very much a long con in terms of producing content for the channel, which maybe let's just say it would have taken 500 hours to beat it, because as you can see I'm not the world's best Isaac player, although it's probably my favourite game of all time. I'm pretty bad at it, and I just get through sheer stubbornness. But again, I actually didn't care, because even though I might get frustrated with the game, quite rightly you might say, that I'd always end up coming back to it in one form or another. So it just felt wrong making this big, I want to improve the game wrong. I'm going to show the creators, look, you have diluted your item pool. It's no longer the fun game that it was. It's just a complete trudge. It's not enjoyable, not to the extent that it was. But again, I found like much with the criticisms on Darkest Dungeon, I just didn't care, because It's, you know, Isaac is I guess you could say it's my gaming comfort blanket. It's a game that I will always come back to. I've bought it for pretty much every system that I own. I've even got it on iPhone and iPad, which is, I think, they're just keeping it out the vanilla Rebirth, because I don't think those devices can handle AfterBirth or AfterBirth Plus. And I've even got it on my PlayStation Vita, and that's pretty much the only reason why I have that console, is my Isaac simulator. Or it was until I got my Switch, which of course I bought it again. So I was becoming very disillusioned with the whole critique idea. And there's nothing worse than dumping, you know, I probably dumped about 60 plus hours into Darkest Dungeon at that point. In Isaac I was probably approaching, well, I'd done several hundred runs, so if each run is an hour, probably a good 100, 150 hours maybe. Half-Life, you know, I did a 12-hour campaign, I think. 1.5 times that to watch it back and do the script. And my other idea was to do start doing Dark Souls. Again, Dark Souls is not a game I'm probably your average gamer, so maybe I'm doing myself down. I'm on the lower side of average rather than being objectively bad at games, but you know, so Dark Souls 1 on PC, I'd beaten Demon Souls round about when it originally came out in the West, so I knew what I was letting myself in for, and obviously the PC one ran like absolute dog's what's nuts. You know, just no good whatsoever. And that was even with applying the fix. Yeah, the fix did absolutely... I think it improved the frame rate. But I think that's about all it did. What it actually ended up doing was removing the bus HUD completely, the bus health gauge. So I could see absolutely nothing of the boss's health gauge, which wasn't a huge problem. The gargoyles were a bit of a pain in the backside, because I think you have a tendency to, well, you obviously know how well you're doing by seeing the boss's health bar go down. If you can't see that, then I think things like, well, is it worth popping an Estus flask right now, obviously becomes a bit difficult, because you just don't know whether it's worth it or not. But the main problem got when I came to Ornstein and Smough. I couldn't see their health bars, but they just glitched out all over the shop. Glitching out to the point where they were just teleporting. I know that is not a part of that fight. You know, as I'm guessing you could say, maybe cheap or unfair, whatever your thoughts on the Ornstein and Smough fight, they are definitely not intended to teleport. Couple that with the fact that you can't see their, well, I couldn't see their health bar. that was that for that game for me. But I thought, no problem. You know what I'll do is I'll move on to Dark Souls 2. I'll just explain at the start of the Dark Souls 2 video basically what I've just said to you now. Maybe people would think that my opinions on Dark Souls 2 would be somewhat invalidated by that. But it would just, you know, from my mind it was a case of, oh, it is what it is. There's nothing I can do to fix that. So I beat Dark Souls 2 and started writing the script. I need to focus. Started writing the script. I was largely done with it. I'd heard that the base game of Dark Souls 2 and the DLC content are hugely different in terms of they almost feel like different games. That the base game of Dark Souls 2 is obviously very different from Dark Souls. They took the series in a Souls series in a different direction with Dark Souls 2. I know Dark Souls 2 is treated like the black sheep of the Dark Souls family. That's fine. I can see where people were coming from with having done half of Dark Souls 1, but also from beating Demon Souls as well, that Dark Souls 2 was a step in a different direction. But once I'd heard that the DLC content was completely different, and then I started making my way through the first one, which I'm forgetting what it's called now. It was around about that time that there were rumours of a remake coming on the horizon. And then obviously the deeper I got into that, writing the script and finding evidence for my points. I'm going to die here. It just didn't feel right releasing any kind of Dark Souls to critique content, especially when some of the points were going to be descriptors of how different this was from the original Dark Souls. You know, why did they take certain design decisions in a completely different way, like the healing in Dark Souls 2 works very differently from Dark Souls 1. I know all the Souls games have changed the healing aspects of it quite a lot. Demon Souls had your grasses and Dark Souls had your Estus. Dark Souls 2 had your Estus, but also the life gems as well that goes along with it. I think Dark Souls 3 has Estus, but that's split between Ash and Estus, different kinds of Estus flasks, and does away with the sort of spot healing that you can do with gems and whatnot. And I gather that Bloodborne has its own healing mechanics as well, because it's got rally healing in it. So they've mocked around with healing. But then once the remake or remaster of Dark Souls 1 was confirmed, it just didn't feel right releasing the Dark Souls 2 content, and then I didn't want to incubate the Dark Souls 2 script and video until whilst waiting for Dark Souls 1 to be done. Simply because I thought, well, what if my feelings on the series change? What if Dark Souls 1 is the best thing since sliced bread, and Dark Souls 2 is an abomination? And I guess it's not really spoilers because the video is not going to see light of day, but I was actually pretty happy with Dark Souls 2 as a game and as an experience. I need to judge when to make my run for it. That wasn't the time. But I think in all of these things it was a case of the main problem was getting out of my own head. Thank God I got the Bible there. Yeah, had I got out of my own head, then the content themselves wouldn't have been necessarily so bad, none of them would have been invalidated. So I thought, why not give myself a chance at Let's Plays. That was a long rambling video, and I was probably very distracted by wondering if my computer was going to blow up. So if you did watch it all, thank you very much for sticking with me through this. Leave a like or comment if you enjoyed it, and hopefully I will see you next time.